The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shepnaz podcast here at Shepherd Church. Our mission is simple, helping people take their next step toward Jesus. Through this podcast, we hope that you're able to engage with us and dive into your spiritual life and walk closer to Jesus. Today, Pastor Rob Paul is here. We're going to be talking about the most recent sermon. We started a brand new series on the 7 letters to the churches in the book of Revelation. We're excited about it. We're going to break down that sermon, talk a little bit more about it so that you kind of get some of the behind the scenes and what might have gotten missed. So let's dive in. Pastor Rob, what's up, man?
Well, it's great to be back and be preaching again. I haven't preached for a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I'm glad I still have my job after that long hiatus, but it's been great to have other pastors and staff members preaching.
Back in the lab.
I've been getting a lot out of it, and I'm sure it's been good for everybody else as well. So, but I'm glad to be back. It's exciting. It's amazing how just deep and rich the Word of God is. Yeah. It's just like, when you jump back into it, it's like, this is so powerful.
Yeah. Yep. That's good. So we started a brand new series this past week.
Yeah.
The
Revelation.
The 7 letters to the churches, 7 words to the church today, really, which we'll dive into over the course of the series.
Right.
That it's not just something for people. I mean, it was for people then, but it is definitely for us now, too.
Yeah. It'll be interesting as we walk through all this to talk about how similar what was happening in the culture then is to what's happening in the culture today, which I think we keep finding that to be, it's like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. We haven't strayed far from the day that the apple fell from the tree or got eaten from the tree, I should say.
It was picked. It didn't fall.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about just some brief introduction of the book of Revelation. Yeah. It is an intimidating book for many readers. Yeah. It is a book a lot of people avoid because it's hard to understand. There are some things that are hard to understand. A lot of pictures, a lot of
imagery, symbolism.
And so a lot of people avoid it for that.
Yeah. And
so let's just kind of introduce it so that people's anxiety toward this book would be calmed as we dive in.
Yeah. So, and I've never preached a series on the book of Revelation. I've preached about stuff in the Revelation, but I've never preached a series on it. So this particular series, we're going to focus on chapters 1, 2, and 3 because the book of Revelation is really divided up into three divisions. Yeah. There's the things that are, the things that you're seeing now, and the things that are going to happen. And of course, when we think of Revelation, we think of the things that are going to happen and the apocalypse and everything else. But it's interesting is in the very first part of the book of Revelation, God says through Jesus and the angel to John that this is meant to encourage the church. It's not, and oftentimes what happens is you read Revelation and it creates anxiety and stress. And it's like, oh my gosh, there's going to be seals and Armageddon and all this other kind of stuff. And the reality of it is that this revelation was given to John to be an encouragement to the church that was going through persecution, which is somewhat similar to what we're experiencing now. That we're not experiencing the degree of persecution that they did, at least in the United States. In other parts of the world,
people are.
They are.
Yeah,
the church with a capital C is, but not as much here. But although we'd still do face persecution, it's just different. But it's interesting. So the book of Revelation really was, it starts with the word revelation is apocalypsis, which means the revealing. And so what really is that God basically came to John through 3 different forms. Jesus spoke directly to him, an angel spoke directly to him, and then an elder spoke directly to John. And through these 3 people speaking to or beings speaking to John, he recorded all this revelation. It even says in Revelation chapter 1, write these things down for the church to encourage them. And so the Lord came to John these different ways to do it. So it's a variety of methods that he received it, but as this revelation is like, this is what's going to happen, and I want it to be encouraging to you. As you're going through these difficult times, let me just remind you, what I'm going to do, God says, is going to happen no matter what's happening now, and this is my plan. And I'm telling you ahead of time, so when it happens, you'll know it wasn't by accident, it was by design, And I think the other really cool thing about it is that the revelation is not a response or a reaction to things that were going on in the world. Like God didn't just say, hey, man, the world's tanking and going south. I need to come up with a plan. No. This plan was in place before Genesis chapter 1, verse
Absolutely.
1. I mean, when he said in the beginning and he said, let there be, and he created all this stuff, this was already there. Mm-hmm. And now what's happening in Revelation, the last book of the Bible, is that he's just letting mankind in on
he's revealing
his plan for the end. Exactly. It's the revelation.
Right. He's revealing the plan.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And there's lots of parts in there I think that are scary. We're not going to get into all that in this series, but it's not scary if you're living in an intimate relationship with Christ, because it's rather exciting to think about what you might experience and what you're going to be a part of as a believer who will reign with Christ in the millennial reign and afterwards. And like it only goes up to a certain point, but we're eternal beings, and so there's so much it isn't even written. We just know what's written. Maybe there'll be another revelation at some point, and we'll know what happens after the end of this revelation. But it's exciting to think that we would have the opportunity to be a part of it. But this first message, we just kind of wanted to talk about Revelation, you know, who wrote it, how did we get it, all those other kinds of things.
Now more than ever, we are in desperate need of the move of God in our world, our nation, our community, and our families. Prayer is a key ingredient in navigating this journey with the hope and assurance of Jesus. Shepherd Church is in the midst of 21 days of prayer, and we would invite you to join. There is a prayer guide available at shepnaz.org. Just click on the 21 Days of Prayer, and you will find a downloadable guide. Our 21 Days of Prayer will conclude Sunday evening, October 1st, with a night of praise and worship beginning at 6 p.m.
One of the things I think that's interesting to me about this is that, as we said earlier, excuse me, the revelation was given to John, who was one of the 12 disciples. You know, when you hear about the disciples, it was that John. And it was when John was 90 years old. And so John had lived a long life, and he was the last living of the original 12 disciples when this happened. And I think the encouraging thing to that for me is that, you know, one of John's greatest contributions to the work of the kingdom happened when he was 90 years old.
Yeah.
And we often think, well, you know, I got to do all my work when I'm younger, and when I'm older, I get cast aside and nothing matters or whatever. Well, John was 90 when he when he received this revelation and shared it with the churches. And I think this is one of his most significant things. Not to downplay any of the other books that he wrote, but man, this is like, this is the end of the book. And this is the story.
And what's encouraging about that is all throughout Scripture, we see age has no bearing on whether or not God can use you.
Right.
We see very young people and elders.
Yeah. Well, Moses was 80.
Yeah.
When he started the Exodus. Noah worked on the ark for over 100 years. So he was you know, of course, and he lived to be 900. So that puts old in perspective, I suppose.
But then, you know, David was a boy when he was first introduced, and you know, says to Timothy, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young." And you know, this is often a tangent, but that's one of the reasons why we believe that every generation matters.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
But it has no bearing on whether or not you can do what God has called you to do. Yeah. So
and interestingly, John, when he received the revelation, he was on the island of Patmos, which was a penal colony, which means it was a island that was only about 13 miles square that was owned by Rome, and it's basically where they sent prisoners that they didn't want to live with everybody else. And there were two things that happened there. One of them is that you were in exile or confinement. And the other one was that you did hard labor, like, you know, digging rocks out of the side of a mountain so they could use them for buildings or whatever.
Yeah.
John, I'm guessing because he was 90, was more in confinement, not breaking rocks out of the side of a mountain.
Sure.
And so he was there, and part of the reason he was there is because, as I said, he was the last living disciple, and there were other Christians who were preaching stuff, but like Peter and Paul had already been martyred 30 years prior to that. So John was really carrying the torch in the Roman Empire, and he was preaching the gospel, and they couldn't shut him up. And so that's why they sent him in exile. They're like, well, you can go preach in a cave. And so he goes to Patmos, is in a cave, and the Lord preaches to him, and then he writes it down and he shares it, and we're talking about it today. So you really couldn't shut that up. But But it's really interesting just how that all happened. And so, again, him being in exile and being punished, and all those kind of things. And actually, if you go to the island of Patmos, you can see the cave that people believe that John lived in, and that the cave that he received the revelation in. Yeah. And of course, I don't know if you've ever been to Israel, there's a building built over everything that
we think that was
where something happened, and so you can't really see what it was actually like. But you can walk into this cave and you can see it. And I showed a picture of it on Sunday. So, but it's all religious up. It's got shrine things in there. But you can still kind of imagine what it would be like. And it was halfway up this mountain, and then on top of the mountain, they've built a monastery there, so people can go there. But it's I'm sure it was a beautiful place to be. But imagine, surrounded by the Aegean Sea and everything, just off the coast of Rome. But still, just such a terrible place to be, and having to. I don't know if they probably didn't bring food to him or anything like that. I mean, it was just like, being exiled, you're alone in confinement, and then this is what happened. So it's pretty cool.
So how did this revelation then come to be? How did he receive the revelation, and how did we kind of get to where we are? Yeah,
I think that would be a great place to start our next podcast, because it's kind of it flows into some other things. So that'd be great.
So hey, we knew that this was going to take more than one episode, because when Pastor Rob, when we have a sermon breakdown, man, we just like to make it more than one. So we're going to wrap it up for today, and we want you to come back tomorrow. We're going to talk more about how the vision came to John, and then how it leads into where we're going in the series. You're not going to miss it. We're going to try to make the hard things plain, so that revelation is no longer something that we avoid, but that we cherish, we celebrate, because God has proven that he's with us and he's for us. If you have any questions, you need to get a hold of us. You can podcast at shepnaz.org. You can find out everything that's happening at Shepherd through our website and app, social media pages. For Pastor Rob, I'm Joey. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.